Hello, everybody. How are we doing this evening? I hope everyone is well. So tonight, I thought I would share with you one of my most recent acquisitions. It's this little fellow right here. This is an American Flyer Locomotive 13. I have the complete train set. It dates from 1926. That's 97 years ago for those of you who are slow at math. I actually have the original box. I'll show you a close-up of this in a moment, but inside here is the train tracks as well. But before we get into all of that, I thought we should at least talk ever so briefly about the company American Flyer, its beginnings and its end ultimately. I think American Flyer, along with Lionel, they're obviously the two most well-known model train or toy train manufacturers here in the United States. There are many others, and there's many others across Spaceship Earth, but American Flyer and Lionel, stand out. They're like Ford and Chevy, right? Anyway, so I think American Flyer is most famous for the development of the S gauge in the 1950s. But the company itself, well, it really begins with this cat named William Hafner, all the way back 1901, I believe. Now, Mr. Hafner, this cat, he managed to develop a clockwork for some toy cars. And again, in 1901 or 1902, for a company he was working for called, cleverly enough, Toy Auto Company. Really inventive, right? Anyway, he developed that clockwork, and he was able to take that clockwork and turn it into O gauge by like 1905 or so. Now, he's got a buddy, also named William Coleman, and at about that same time, give or take, Mr. Coleman gains a majority share of a hardware store or several hardware stores in the Chicago area. So Hafner and Coleman decide to kind of go into business together. This is like late 1906, early 1907, so somewhere in there. So these two friends get together. They're going to start producing toy trains in these hardware manufacturers. They're not actual stores that sell hammers and nails. It's a manufacturing facility that makes hardware for hardware stores. Anyway, so they're going to start making trains, and through Hafner's relationships with some guys, they managed to secure $15,000 in orders from a company called G. Summers and Montgomery Wards. And this is, again, 1908, 1909, somewhere in there. Well, by 1910, Hafner and Coleman Incorporated, if you will, becomes American Flyer. And the train that you kind of see here today, or an earlier version of it, was born. Now, by 1913, Hafner and Coleman aren't getting along anymore, and Hafner leaves and forms his own train company that goes on to have really tremendous success in the country. And American Flyer does very, very well during the time period of World War I, as does Lionel and Ives and other train companies, because German manufacturers were, of course, locked out of the U.S. market. So by like 1918, I think American Flyer is introducing their first electric trains, or getting rid of or away from clockwork. This is not a tin toy, this is cast iron. Now by like 1928, one of their competitors, Ives, you've heard me mention it, they basically filed for bankruptcy. And American Flyer and Lionel purchased Ives as a joint venture. But by 1930, American Flyer had sold its shares to Lionel. And by 1967, American Flyer had basically become bankrupt. Even Lionel itself, I think, went bankrupt. Just a few years later, they ended up selling to General Mills because the era of trains had kind of come to an end. Although it's had resurgences, Lionel still exists today, though again, it's not the same company that it once was. It's changed hands many, many times. But at any rate, let's just show you this. Well, let's start with some train tracks. Again, this is from 1926, so this is in tremendously good shape, all things considered. Let's just do this. Here's, I have a whole bunch of this track. Correct to the box. As I mentioned, there's the box. I'll show you a close-up of the box. One thing that's unique to this particular train is the key that goes into the clockwork is fixed. It does not come out. But as you can see, if I wind her up, she runs just fine. Probably not as strong as she once was. I'm going to take you over to the setup that I have. I'm sure I'll mention it again, but I have some Ives track set up because when I set up the American Flyer track, its diameter is just too large for the space. So I have some Ives track from the same era, 1922, something like that, that works just fine for display purposes. Anyway, let's here's a close-up of the box. Go ahead, let's take a look. So here is the box for that 1926 train set. America Flyer, the toy for the boy. It's held up pretty well, all things considered. Here's the side of the box. Again, all things considered, the box is in pretty good shape. Pretty cool, right? Now let's go show you the setup with the tender and the two Pullman cars that came from 1926. They're really in tremendous condition. I'm very fortunate to have them in my collection. I like having them on display, but let's go take a look. So currently this train set resides here. Close up again, you can see American Flyer 13, the fixed key. It is in remarkable shape considering it's 97 years old. There's the tender. Still has its coal. It does function as I showed you. Here's a couple of the Pullmans that came with the set. All in all, in really good shape. A little crazing of the paint, but that's to be expected, I think. The track you see there is actually from an Ives set. It was a little bit smaller in circumference and fit the table better, so I put the American Flyer on that. And yes, right in front there, that is an Ives locomotive and tender, but that's a story for another day. That's actually on some American Flyer track. This track is period correct. It would be from the 20s. I actually have some Ives track from 1910, but that is also a story for another day. You know, when you think about it, at 97 years, the little boy or little girl who got this train on Christmas Day all those years ago has probably shuffled off this mortal coil onto their next incarnation and no longer here on Spaceship Earth, and yet their toy remains, and it'll be with me till I shuffle off this mortal coil. Anyway, I thought it was really, really awesome. It's just amazing how well it has held up. Clearly, the boy or girl did not play with it a whole lot, and it spent many, many years in that box. As I always say, in this world, when you could be anything you want, you be kind, you be humble, you be forgiving. Have a good day. We'll see you next time.